By making biodiesel more cost competitive with petroleum diesel, the $1 per gallon tax credit creates jobs, strengthens U.S. energy security, reduces harmful and costly emissions, diversifies the fuel market, and ultimately lowers costs to the consumer. There is a clear correlation between this tax incentive and increased biodiesel production, which has grown from about 100 million gallons in 2005, when the tax incentive was first implemented, to being on pace to produce 1.7 billion gallons in 2013. The benefits are clear. Biodiesel is diversifying our fuel supply so that we are not at the mercy of global oil markets that are heavily influenced by unstable regions of the world and global events beyond our control. Biodiesel is made from an increasingly diverse mix of resources, such as recycled cooking oil, agricultural oils, and animal fats. The EPA has recognized its environmental benefits by classifying it as an advanced biofuel. Biodiesel production in Iowa supports roughly 5,000 jobs and adds over $235 million to Iowa household income. However, the tax incentive has expired twice in its short history, creating significant disruptions in the industry. Additionally, the annual threat of losing the tax incentive has stunted growth, limited biodiesel producers' access to capital and investment, and restricted their ability to expand. With only about 7 years of commercial scale production, biodiesel remains a young and maturing industry that needs stable tax policy to continue meaningful growth and momentum towards the industry's goal of constituting 10% of the on-road U.S. diesel market by 2022. It is also important to remember that billions in industry-specific petroleum tax subsidies have existed since 1913 and continue to this very day. The young biodiesel industry must find its foothold on this uneven playing field. Therefore, Mr. Clovis, as a member of the U.S. Senate, would you support extending the biodiesel blenders tax credit?
Well, if we're going to take tax credits and subsidies away from the oil industry, and now you're asking me to support a tax credit for another part of the industry, I think that's going to be hard for me to reconcile. If we are successful in taking away the tax credits and subsidies to big oil, then I think that the biodiesel aspect of this ought to be able to stand on its own, because that's intellectually consistent, and that's a position that I think a person ought to be is intellectually consistent in this. So if you're going to ask me to do away with tax credits on one side and then embrace tax credits on the other, I think that's going to be difficult to do. I also think that there are also other aspects of this we have to look at. If you take a look at the rollback that we're looking at from the EPA on the 2014 rules that they're talking about, most of the rollback, about 1.735 billion gallons of the rollback, is coming in the advanced biofuels, okay? So this is an area, again, I think we're going to have to take a hard look at. Right now, the technology is not there. We don't have a firm footing with biodiesel in this situation, and firm economic footing. I think a firm economic footing comes if we start to level the playing field, and I think the way to level the playing field is to get rid of those subsidies for oil and let the biodiesel compete on a level playing field.
Thank you, Mr. Clovis. Mr. Jacobs, as a member of the U.S. Senate, would you support extending the biodiesel blenders tax credit?
I would, and I think this is an area where Sam and I are going to have a different point of view. Having been in the business world all my career and having been in the energy industry a good bit of that, I do believe that there's a role for the government to play to help new technologies get off the ground and reach commercialization size and scale. And I think that when you look back, we wouldn't have an ethanol industry in Iowa today if there wasn't a tax advantage to begin with to get that industry started. Now let me be clear, I don't support the idea that industries, new technologies should have subsidies in perpetuity. That makes no sense at all to me. Ultimately, they need to stand on their own economics. But the fact of the matter is, in many cases, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions, in some cases billions of dollars of investment required for new technologies to reach to the point to where they can be commercially viable on their own. And if our government doesn't play a role in helping to support some of those new technologies, they're never going to happen. And I think that would be a real shame if sitting here in Iowa today we didn't have those 2,600 jobs directly in the industry, and the 60,000 jobs that are supported by our renewable fuels situation. You know, I think the challenge we're going to have in biodiesel, and I put this challenge out to the industry, is we're not going to be able to have those subsidies in perpetuity. So I think the challenge to the industry is we've got to figure out how we can make biodiesel cost competitive with regular diesel here, just like we've done in the ethanol industry. And so I would certainly be prepared to support the extension of the tax credit for biodiesel for a period of time. But again, at some point that subsidy needs to go away and it needs to stand on its own economics. And I think we can all debate when is the right time for that to be. But this industry is too new here to snuff that out. I think we also need to provide the industry some certainty. This idea of a short-term extension or one-year extensions, that makes it very difficult for companies to make sizable capital investment decisions. As a former CEO of a big company, I looked at capital investment decisions all the time. And when you have a lot of regulatory uncertainty, that just means at the end of the day that there's a higher likelihood that new projects don't get approved. And I think we owe it to our people in this state, we owe it to the capital investors that are putting their capital at risk to try to make this industry economic. We owe it to them to give them the certainty that they deserve.